We'd like to thank Mainspring Companies for sponsoring Season 1 of The Next Entrepreneur. Mainspring celebrates the entrepreneurial journey, and we are very grateful for their support.
My confidence was really low because
Yeah.
I felt I was on from the wrong side of the tracks, and then I get cut from the baseball team. That was good, I thought. It took me some time to build that up a little bit, a lot of years. And it's not about what happens to you, I don't think. It's how you react to it.
Welcome back to the Next Entrepreneur podcast. I'm your host, Andrew McClendon, here with our producer, Daniel Sagona, and excited about our guest today, Eric Rigby. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, Eric is with Rigby Financial Group in Nolens, Louisiana. How do you say that, Eric?
New Orleans.
New Orleans, okay. One of those kind of guys. All right, and Eric, I have been following his content on social media. He strikes me as being a big thinker, a deep thinker, and I think he's a bit self-deprecating and maybe doesn't give himself that much credit. But I see what you do there, Eric, and I wanted to bring you in, and I think you have a unique perspective on the entrepreneur's journey. I'm interested in not only your journey, but also what you see, what you've learned from those that you do business with. And so tell us briefly what your business is and what you do right now.
Simply, I try to help people. So by training, I'm a CPA and a financial planner. But at the end of the day, I try to help people. So we have a firm that's essentially a virtual CFO firm. So we handle all financial matters for three basic segments: real estate investors, physicians who do surgery, and who are entrepreneurial and high wealth individuals and their families, and just try to help them solve their problems.
Very cool. And so you've been in business now for, what, about 25 years?
Yeah.
And so we'll get into that. I wanted to bring it back a notch and try to go to your, start with your earlier years. And you and I actually attended the same elementary school for some years. I think are you a year younger than me?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
I just look a little bit younger.
Well, yeah, right. Okay. So why don't we start there in your younger years and tell us a little bit about your young life, what your family was like, and what impact growing up the way that you did may have had ultimately on who you are today and your journey.
Well, first, let me tell you that I'm very thankful and grateful to be here. And I'm thankful and grateful for my parents. They taught me a lot of great lessons. I didn't exactly understand them at the time. And there was a lot of grit and determination that I learned from them, and I'm eternally grateful to them. So that's first. We grew up as kind of a lower middle class family. We lived on the wrong side of the tracks. In Baton Rouge, there was this road, Flannery Road, and we lived in these doubles. We had moved there from Houston, and so I'd started elementary school at St. Thomas More in the 6th grade, and, played football, had some great coaches there, a lot of great people to mentor, a lot of nuns who I'll never forget. And I loved playing sports, but my folks only had one car. And so from St. Thomas More to where I lived was probably 1.5 miles, and it was a long walk by yourself a lot of days. And it just is what it is. And when your friends, moms and dads are picking them up in station wagons, and your folks, they just have one car and your dad's working, it's it's a little embarrassing. So a little chip on my shoulder.
You're one of
four.
One of
so
four.
I have 3 brothers.
Okay, one of 4 boys.
And they all live in Baton Rouge, great people. And so, it was always fun, interesting. And, we always knew on Saturday morning when my mom got home about 10:30, there was a little bit of cookies, maybe a bag of Keebler or non-brand cookies and a couple of oranges and apples, and those were gone by noon because there was a big fight over who was going to get what quick.
Right.
So it was fun. I mean, before...
Let me interrupt there because I can really relate to that because I was one of 7, right? And there was at times seemingly not enough to go around, and I can remember there being times at dinner where, you would notice that there were a couple extra pork chops on the grill there, but you had to go through your meal at an easy pace. Like you couldn't bring attention to any of your brothers or sisters that you were trying to eat fast so you could get to seconds first because you'd be disqualified if that happened. And so you'd eat, as purposefully as possible, and then you'd casually get up, and make your way over to the stove and say, "Hey, Mom, could I have another pork chop?" But you were eyeing that second pork chop the whole time, So you had to ration your food, it seemed at times.
And that's fine. It was part of the deal. I had a job in second grade, and I threw papers in Houston. So the Houston Chronicle was an afternoon paper. The Post was the morning. So I'd come home in second, third, fourth, fifth grade, and I threw papers because I knew if I wanted anything extra, I needed to get it. So we wanted a pool table. So my brothers and I pooled our money, and I was in third grade, and we bought a pool table, and I got a bike. I always wanted a bike. So I had a job, get up on Sunday mornings at 4:30, put the sections of the Houston Chronicle together, put them in a grocery cart, go around the complex and deliver them. And I didn't know any better. That third grade, everybody else didn't have a job, but it was fun.
Yeah.
And my dad, when I had a little money, it was funny. I wanted to spend it on our family. So I'd go buy 2 dozen donuts or something that we didn't have.
Right.
And so it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And it's part of the passion and the fire and the drive that I have in myself. And it took me a long time to figure out that I'm going to be okay. And that.
But could you sense, was it really clear to you at a young age that maybe you didn't have what some of your friends' families had?
It was unfortunately very apparent, and probably due to my own psychological makeup, because when you go over to Mike Leggio's house, they got 6 kids, a swimming pool. Their dad comes home, plays basketball with them, and Tony Leggio's jumping off the ledge of the second story into the pool, and there's snacks and Cokes and all kinds of stuff, and you're like, wow, where do you get Coca-Cola? I didn't even know they had that. I thought it was Czech Cola. And I'm like, wow, I want to go back over there. Yeah. And so, it was very apparent to me. And when I played baseball, I tried out for this team. It was the McDonald's baseball team.
Right.
There was a great CPA, Jake Ragusa, who ran it. And there were so many kids who went out for this team. There were like 170 kids for the team. So they're down to the last 15 kids, and they got to cut one kid. And then so some assistant coach says, you over here, you over here, you over here. Guess who the last one not called was? Me. I was number 15. I didn't make it. And I'm like, man, I just got crushed.
Yeah.
So that, I think that my confidence was really low because I felt I was on from the wrong side of the tracks. And then I get cut from the baseball team. That was good, I thought. Yeah. And so it took me some time to build that up a little bit, and a lot of years. And it's not about what happens to you, I don't think. It's how you react to it. Mm-hmm. And just because you tell yourself a story doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah, well, it sounds like while those factors were working against you, deep down inside you weren't buying it as that was your station in life. That's where you were meant to be or meant to stay.
No, my parents worked hard. They instilled faith in us. I was an altar boy from a very young age. I learned that God was important to me. There were some great priests who were mentors to us. Father Green. There was a guy named Father Danner. He was at St. Thomas More. He used to come to our house on Friday nights and eat dinner. And so there were a lot of great things that happened there. And so I think we need to sometimes take a minute and reflect on what was positive.
Right.
And on a daily basis, I have a little app. It's a gratitude journal. It pops up at 9:30 at night. What are you grateful for today? What are you thankful for today? And it reminds me how lucky I am, how grateful I am, and what a wonderful life I have.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. All right, so you're leading into your high school years, right? And you start Catholic high school here in Baton Rouge.
Love it. Very excited. Got in. Still a little mixed up. I wanted to play sports, so I wanted to play football. And my best buddy at that time, his name was Kyle Boardlawn. He looked similar to me. He's like, we got to play football. We played football at St. Thomas More in 8th. Let's do this. So I sign up, and my dad says, how are you going to get home? I said, I'll find a ride. Don't worry about it. He said, no, you can't play sports. Although my dad was the most valuable athlete in Menard High School in 1958, was the quarterback, captain of the basketball team, and got drafted in high school.
So is it a financial decision on his part?
It was a financial logistics. We lived further out.
Right.
There was one car. It just wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And so, a little heartbreaking for a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit of a turning stage. And then, one time over the PA of the whole school, one of the brothers says, will the following 14 people come down to my office? And I walk in, and he's like, your tuition's not paid. And I'm like, Mike Leggio's sitting there, and his dad's loaded. And he's got a racehorse that ran in the Kentucky Derby. I remember the horse's name, Bold Chapeau. And I'm like, all right, let's work something out. And he's like, yeah, what you need to work out is getting a check here tomorrow. And so I went home and said, Dad, I need a check tomorrow. We need to take care of this Catholic High thing. And he's like, this ain't going to work because I can't make this swing for one of y'all. And there's 3 behind you, and that wouldn't be fair. And it was like a dagger in my heart.
So are you, where are you in the school year at this point? Are you halfway through, near the end?
3/4 of the way through, near the year end. And so
they're going to get you to the end of the 9th grade, or maybe not.
Yeah, they're going to get me to the end of the 9th grade, but it's cut.
So after that, you're out of Catholic High.
I'm out of Catholic
You got friends
High,
there.
Kids I grew up with for the last 4 or 5 years. And in that time period, it was really the place that all the St. Thomas More, St. Aloysius, St. George kids, they all kind of compiled there.
Right.
Then, so being a smart ass, we lived down the street from Episcopal. I'm like, how about Episcopal? He's like, hey, dumbass, that's twice as much as Catholic High. I'm like, well, we could maybe find a way. No.
So you're off to public schools.
And so it's a whole different environment. I mean, Catholic High, Brother Gordian put up with nothing.
Right.
I mean, he'll throw his keys at you. He'll call you dumbass. They used to have a mechanism to open the windows. He would throw that at people, slap you upside the head, whatever. And more stories were probably embellished than actually happened. Yeah. But I saw him take a kid out of the desk and throw him halfway across the room one time.
And many of those kids in those stories needed something.
Yeah, I had friends who weren't necessarily always 100% focused on earth science at that point. Yeah.
So it's kind of a second blow. I mean, you've got the baseball team that you'd not made, and now you're out of Catholic High. So you're on to public schools, and so what would you think is a defining story out of that? I mean, let me put it this way, how did you respond to that? going from the Catholic high environment to a public school environment, did that have a adverse impact on you for the remaining 3 years of your high school career?
Yeah, I was embarrassed about it till probably 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't have been, but I was.
Yeah.
And so, people would ask me, where'd you go to high school? I went to Catholic High. Well, I did go to Catholic High only for a year.
Right.
And so I just didn't assimilate well at Woodlawn. Yeah. Played some baseball, couldn't find a niche, just kind of floated around and bought my time there. And I worked. I had another job. And so probably had 2 jobs during that time. I worked at a place called Toots Fried Chicken on Sherwood Forest across from the old National Canal Villery, catty corner from the McDonald's. There's a local family that owns the franchise there. And so, in high school, by the time I was a senior, I was the night manager. I was working, 5 to 6 nights a week. I was making good money, could do what I wanted. And so I went to school, but I wasn't very well assimilated. And so college time comes around. Right. I'm like, Dad, I want to go to Tulane. That's probably not. So I get a partial scholarship to Loyola. No, we're not going to be able to pull that train. And, in hindsight, I understand that. So I went to LSU. I'd saved up $827.60, and that covered me for the first semester. And
so you're paying your way through college at that point.
Yeah, my folks are helping when they can,
right?
And and so my worst dream would be overdrawing my bank account on the weekend and having to run to a bank to cover some check, like to Murphy's Bar and Grill or something. So I started hanging around some really good people. Some people have some desire and aspirations and some drive. And I joined a fraternity after the first year, and really great people that I met, and forever thankful that I made those relationships. And some of those people really showed me the way. It took a little getting used to because I didn't know what a pink button-down was or a pair of topsiders. And so someone lent me a pair of topsiders, and there was a clothing store right off college called O'Donoghue's. So I'd work at, the fried chicken place or the A&P bagging groceries on the weekends, and I had a student job. And I don't mean to sound melodramatic about this, but so I'd work all night stocking groceries for this guy, Jim Nipper, who went to Woodlawn with me. He was like an assistant manager. And then during the week, I'd work at a student job on campus from like 1 to 6 or 1 to 5. And so I'd take all my money, and all of a sudden, I'd go buy a pink button-down. Well, I just spent 2 weeks of salary on a pink button-down, which was 100% cotton, and maybe a pair of topsiders. But
right.
It meant so much to me because I wanted to assimilate. I wanted to be like everybody else.
Well, you probably wanted to be in that group. To be in a fraternity, from my perspective, in that age, that was something. I'm one of 7 and 5 boys, and while my 2 sisters were able to attend the sororities, the fraternities were out of the question for the boys, but you were able to make it happen by going out and earning your way. And I'm just curious, that sense of belonging to something that's impressive in a way. It's a socioeconomic stamp of, a place in life.
It helped me with my confidence. I'm not sure it's for everyone.
Yeah.
I have a 19-year-old daughter. She's in a private school in Kentucky Center. She's in a sorority. And it's not a big deal there because there's 1,400 kids. And, she participates. But, it was the center of social life at that time for me. So it said, you're accepted. You belong.
Right.
And so that did a lot for me, for my confidence. And being around some people that had some very big aspirational goals was also great.
Yeah, that's cool. And so your curriculum, I mean, what are you studying at that time at LSU?
I wasn't sure. Yeah, my dad's a CPA, and I'm like, I want to be a history teacher, and I take an aptitude test. And you'd be a great professor. And he's like, dude, you're not going to make any money being a professor. I said, but I might like it. He's like, get an accounting degree, and you can always get a job.
Right.
So I do it. I didn't fall in love with it. It wasn't like the time I met my wife for the first time, I'm like, I'm going to marry that woman. It's like, all right, I'll do it.
Yeah.
It was like taking medicine.
Right.
I do fine with it. I come out of LSU. At that time, the national firms were called the Big Eight. By the grace of God, someone looked the other way and hired me in Ernst & Young. I had talked to a local Baton Rouge firm, and their managing partner's name was Jake. And, my grades were like 3.3, 3.4. They weren't the 3.8, the 3.9. He's like, I'm not so sure that you're smart enough to work here. I said, I'm so smart, I'm not going to work here. And so my friend who got me the interview walks me down the hall and says, just because you think it doesn't mean you need to speak it, Rigby. And he said, you kind of blew your chance. I'm like, I didn't want to work for him anyway. And so he was condescending to me. And he's like, well, he's the biggest dude in town. You could have just let that go. I'm like, yeah, I probably should have in hindsight, but I ain't working here anyway.
It's funny.
So
you ended up going with Ernst & Young?
Worked with them for a while. I was very interested in kind of helping people, and they wanted me to sit at a conference room table for 16, 17 hours a day and add up general ledgers and foot cash and tie receivables. And I'm like, hey, man, these guys are in debt. Let's help them figure out that we're in the middle of an oil field crisis, and their tugboats are choking pilings, and their debt's the same. Why don't we talk to them maybe about refinancing the boats or selling them? And they just look at me and shake their head and said, go back, start footing the phone book or something. Sit in your cubicle, crank these out. And I just found it boring.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I didn't go to school and pay this money, and I still had student loans to sit around for 14 hours a day being miserable. Thoreau said the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, and I have fought for years to figure it out, and it just took me a little bit longer because now I'm just a slow learner with a little excess cash. So, I kind of hopped around for a while in jobs, and you've been here now for 2 years, Eric. You ever thought about looking for a job with one of our clients? I'm like, no, I want to be a partner here. By the way, here's this client I brought in, and here's a retainer check for us to do a study on their inventory. And they're like, who told you to do that? I said, nobody, I just wanted to help them. And they're like, go back to the cubicle, fill out some tax returns or some audit work papers. I'm like, can't y'all hire somebody to do that? They're like, no, we hired you to do that. And so the light just never really went off. And finally, it's time for you to look for another job. See the secretary, she'll help you update your resume game, after about the fourth peer, review or counseling session. And so ultimately I had a friend, and he worked for KPMG. He's like, I need some help. I'm like, all right, great. I said, but I'm going to start a business. He's like, oh, you don't want a job? I'm like, no, I don't want a job, but I'll help you out. And so I made a deal with him. And so the deal was I'd work 3 days a week to start. They would give me health insurance, 401k, and a salary of X, Y, and Z, which I could live on. And then I was going to start my own company. And so I started recruiting young doctors at Charity Hospital in New Orleans, doing tax returns for like $100 a night. And I'd go to the ER, meet them, put up signs all over the hospital, tax returns for residents who are moonlighting. So moonlighting means after medical school, they're in residency. And at that time, the surgeons could go and man emergency rooms like in Port Sulphur, Fouchon, wherever. And they get paid like $100 an hour, which was a ton of money then.
$100 an hour?
$100 an hour, but they weren't withholding taxes. So some of these surgery residents were making $50,000 and $60,000 a year, moonlighting from Friday night to Monday morning at 6 a.m.
Right.
And so they're making a bunch of money, and they're like, what do we do with these taxes? So I got one of them. One turned to 2, 2 turned to 4, 4 turned to 16. And all of a sudden, I had a bunch of these residents. And I was just doing tax returns, but it was good. It was side money, and so that's how I started my firm. And so I still have some of those clients to this day.
That's amazing. So, so the stories you're telling when you're with the, the Ernst & Young company, and, there's this entrepreneurial thing that's surfacing in this, what you're seeing in the business, like, hey, we can go get more business. We can, why don't we go after this? Some of the things we've talked about. And I'm just curious, looking back, on that, do you think that is something that, it was just in your DNA, it's just in your makeup to try to expand opportunities? Or just curious, what are your thoughts about that? I mean, how many of the other guys in the other cubicles and the other ladies in the other cubicles are going and saying those same things? Hey, let's go try to get this additional service or provide,
some consulting or advisory, some advice to help this client. None. So the question is, where did it really come from? And I think you learn that lesson when you're in 5th grade pushing a lawnmower around looking for 32-ounce Coke bottles to cash in to get some gasoline to cut the next person's lawn. Right. So, when you want some extra, when you want Converse tennis shoes, and I got Kmart tennis shoes, and there were 4 of us, so they'd write our names, Eric on the left shoe, Rigby on the right. And I'm like, I don't want to wear Kmart shoes, so go cut grass, got a pair of Converse high tops, and those were mine. And when you touch my shoes and your brother, it was Fifth City, man. Those were mine. You're not wearing them.
Right.
And so I think that drive came, and that fire came from knowing that I need to take care. If I wanted a little extra, if I wanted Converse instead of Kmart, then you got to earn it.
So they're writing the names on your shoes. So if you left them somewhere, those shoes were coming back to you.
Right. So that we were, like Irish twins. I mean, I was 8, my other brother was 7, my other brother was 6, and then there was like a 3-year-old. But, so we didn't mix up our shoes, or I left them somewhere. They were coming back home.
Right.
Or you don't mix them up with your brother's shoes.
But you really didn't want your name printed on your shoes.
I did not want my mom writing with a Sharpie Eric Rigby on my shoes. And, when I was playing baseball, everybody else had cleats. I had tennis shoes. That hurt.
Yeah.
But you know what? So what? I've got the greatest parents who've instilled values, faith in me, hard work, determination, and I'm forever thankful for them.
Well, it's all about the foundation that they've laid for you in your life and how you were raised, right? That gets you to where you are today.
Yeah, it's that right and wrong. It's the, you're put on this earth to do something good.
Yeah. Okay, that is a good place for us to take a break and get a word in from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. Modus is a proud sponsor for the Next Entrepreneur podcast, and we welcome them to the show. Modus is a national facilities services company performing work for Fortune 500 companies all over the United States. So who is Modus and what do they do? These guys do the non-mechanical installations inside big distribution and fulfillment centers. So the way they like to say it is they take it from the conveyor to the dock door. What does that mean? It means they're building the pick stations. They're doing all the cabling for all of the electronic equipment. They're putting in bollards and barricades and signage and tape on the floor. And these are in huge facilities. They work in really tight time frames. They've never missed a schedule. So if you need help with your facility services in your distribution facilities, reach out to Modus. Modus can be found at modusmoves.com. And we are back with Eric Rigby. Eric, you just started your business at this point, and today, you've been in business for 25 years. So why don't you walk us through your business, how you started, how you grew it, and some of the high points, low points in that process.
So I had a buddy, and they owned a marine construction company and an engineering company. And then we were just talking one night at basketball, and he's like, man, I really need some help. I need somebody to handle these owners' finances, their tax returns, the financial statements, and all the things I can't get to. And, I'd met Jennifer, my now wife at that time, and we're dating. And so I leave a job. My friend Roger offers me a 3-day-a-week gig, which I'm in love with, because they're going to pay me the same thing I'm making at this other company for 3 days a week, a W-2 employee. I get health insurance, 401k, and all that. Jennifer and I had just met. We're doing well. We're getting along. And I had started going to Charity Hospital at night because I had a friend who was a resident, and he needed help because these residents were moonlighting on the weekend, mostly in small towns, ER, covering for other doctors. They were getting paid $100 an hour, but they weren't withholding taxes. So I help him, and he tells a buddy, and then all of a sudden I've got 10, 15, 20 residents, and, this is 1994, and I'm like, wow, this is real money. And it was, I'm learning, and I'm like, doctors want my help? This is awesome. Yeah. So let me back up for a second. So when I meet Jennifer and I start working this 3-day-a-week job and I start my firm, I'm like, I don't want to F this up. I don't really want to mess this up. And I'm like, I'd been through a couple jobs and wasn't exactly sure where I was going or where I wanted to go. So I have the bright idea. I have a client who's a psychiatrist. His name was Scott Griffey. He's a great guy. And he gives me the name of 5 psychiatrists. And I said, do you think they could help me? He said, if you want the help bad enough, they could help you. So I start this journey, and the psychiatrist really helps me examine my thought process and my belief process and kind of builds me back up and says that you are worthy. And, I was struggling with different things. Like I went and bought a $4,000 shotgun. I mean, because I wanted to prove to everybody I had made it, so I could go shoot sporting clays and skeet and ducks. And I'm out there with this $4,000 shotgun, and, we probably need to buy a house before I need a $4,000 shotgun. Right. So I was behind on my bill with the psychiatrist. He said, you took my money and you bought a shotgun? And so it really resonated, that lesson that, you have responsibilities, you have obligations. So over the next 3 years, once a week, at $125 an hour, medical insurance isn't paying it, I'm committed to my growth. Wow. I'd struggled earlier years, Tony Robbins tapes, Norman Vincent Peale, the positive thinking thing. And I just couldn't get it. Right. So it came to me to work on me. And subsequently to that, which were probably the most important life-changing events, because I really delved into me and my thinking and why I was doing things, and if I was self-sabotaging, why, what was I trying to prove, and it really set me up for something great.
Now, did you feel like you were carrying this baggage around from not only, short-lived tenures at past jobs, but things from your childhood? I mean, is that kind of what your purpose in therapy was?
I didn't know. I just knew I was screwed up and that it wasn't working and I needed to change something.
Yeah.
And so, reliving some of those experiences, although very beneficial, is a little painful.
Yeah.
And, but I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I had a lot to offer and I could really help people. It might not necessarily be sitting in a cubicle for 16 hours in one shell square footing trial balances, but I had a different process. And my brain worked a lot different than a lot of those bean counters. And so what I wanted to do was help people.
Right.
And so that's kind of where my business started, was helping these residents, minimize their taxes. I didn't think of it as doing tax returns. I thought of it as telling them they could write off their mileage and hotel bills and other things like that. So that's kind of was pretty significant. And around the same time, I met my wife. So those were, two big changing points. We'll be married 25 years this December, and I'm not sure anybody else would have put up with me.
Yeah. So did you see things in your young business start to come together with the benefits that you'd gotten through your therapy?
Yeah. Through digging deeper and asking people, why is that important? Or what is this really about? And so we do a fair amount of financial planning. And one of the first questions I do with a prospective client is, why is money important to you? And if they're married, to you and your wife.
Right.
And my goal in that session is to make somebody cry, to get down really deep as to why money is important. I have a client, 82 years old. He's got $17 million liquid, not assets,
right.
liquid. And he won't give his wife a cell phone because he's afraid he's going to run out of money. I said, you could throw $100 bills off a Mardi Gras float for the rest of your life every day and not run out of money. So one day he's complaining about some bill. I said, hand me your checkbook. I rip out 10 checks. I hand it to his 75-year-old wife. I said, go spend as much as you want on anything you want. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you got more money. Enjoy it. And so now he's starting to enjoy his life.
Yeah.
And so he's not a miser. He's spending time and money for enjoyment and relationships and experiences. And that's what I'm about, is trying to help people.
Yeah, but, and you can imagine what that guy's story was growing up, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's a reason people do the things that they do, and everyone has this past, and they have this experience growing up and how that impacted them, and
And if we're going to have a great relationship with people, I need to understand that story. And I want to understand it so I understand that you went through the depression or whatever it was.
Right.
And it's really important, and it binds us together because they know I understand them. And I love it.
Isn't that fascinating, though?
It's cool.
I mean, it seems like, part of your job is a little bit of therapy, and
to dig and understand.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Before I came here, I was meeting with a real estate investor. He's got all these apartments and houses and commercial, and every family is dysfunctional. It's just a matter of degrees. Okay.
Right.
And so he told me his story, and that's what I needed to know and to understand where he was before I could help him.
Right.
So, I think that was, a big turning point. And as we grew as a firm, I insist that we understand people and what they want and hear from them, and not set an agenda to sell them a tax return, a financial statement, and an audit.
Right.
But sit down with these entrepreneurs and these doctors and real estate investors and understand what they want, and not drive our agenda, but help them to get where they want to go. Because God gave us gifts, I think, and we all have unique abilities. And what I learned from that experience was I have an ability to help people and a desire to help them get what they want. And
Right.
if I learn to listen to them, they'll tell me.
Right.
So it's kind of cool. It's fun. And, as we grew, we started picking up bigger clients. Our residents went into business. I've got clients in Chicago, Key West, San Diego, Seattle, where we help them with their practices, their financial planning. I'm very blessed to have them. So one of my buddies left a job, and he was an employee benefit HR director. And I'm like, I can help you. We can grow in the employee benefit section. He's like, you don't have any clients? I'm like, that never stopped me before. And so I hire him, and with no clients. and employee benefits. And within 2 years, we have Hornbeck Offshore, Freeport Copper and Gold, Freeport Oil and Gas, and a couple of their subsidiaries. And all of a sudden, Katrina comes August 29th, 2005. I remember being in the Freeport McMoran building trying to finish up this audit, and my guys doing all the work, and I'm talking to their team, and there's like evacuating rigs. And, I wake up from a haze 2 weeks later, not 2 days, from watching CNN thinking,
Right.
Is my house gone? And my office building was at 1515 Poydras, right across from the Superdome where all the evacuees were there. And the Superdome was decimated not only from the top from the weather, but a lot of people were there, and they had to do a lot of renovations. And I lived with my parents at age 41 or 2 for 6 weeks, not knowing if I had a business or a house for several weeks. And then my buddy called me and said, look, I'm going in. And so he had lost his daughter at Thanksgiving that year. She was 5.
Oh, my goodness.
His wife said, you need to go get those baby pictures. So we drove in. He gets a pass from the state police. We get in a flatboat at by the Southern Yacht Club. We go down Canal Boulevard. The water is even with the power lines. It's 14, 15 feet deep.
Oh, my
A
gosh.
week after Katrina. We kicked down his front door of his house in Lakeview on Sardonyx, and we had one thing to do, get those baby pictures. And we got them.
Wow.
And his house was flooded. His dining room table was upside down. Chairs were all over the place. It was the grossest thing I've ever seen in my life. But it was one of the proudest things I've ever done because it was so important to his wife. And we did it. And we got something that was worth more than money, worth more than furniture. All that shit can be replaced. But what she wanted was something she needed.
And so, what's going on with your business at this time? It's New Orleans is flooded out. That's,
80% of the city is underwater. We don't know when we can come in. At that time, there weren't virtual servers, Amazon Web Services, so everything was on computers.
Right.
So I tell my wife, get in the car, we're going to New Orleans. She said, for what? I said, don't worry about it. Wear a pair of shorts. We're on the 22nd floor. I bring a dolly. She's like, what do you need a dolly for? I said, we need to get some files. We got to get some work done. And what I didn't tell her was we were going to cart a server down 22 flights of stairs because there was no electricity in the building. That might have been the closest we came to parting ways. But we did it together as a team. We carried that server down on a dolly 22 flights of stairs with people with automatic machine guns in the basement of the building because they were afraid of the looting.
Right.
So I get back to New Orleans, and I rent a space off Sherwood Forest on a place
Back to
called
Baton Rouge.
Wrexham. Yeah, after Katrina.
Yeah.
And my wife, my kindergarten daughter, and I are living in my parents' spare bedroom. And I'm trying to build a business. I'm working 12, 14 hours a day, not knowing what to do, but having to make a plan.
Right.
And so we make this plan. I open up an office. I get a hold of people. We start working, and I'm like, wow, we need some cash. We don't have any money coming in.
Right.
And, it's not like we're going to send emails and see people are going to send us checks at that point. So I think, and we have this great client, and they're in New Orleans, and I got this client because my practice consultant, Bill Reeb, is just a great human being. The guy that we started the employee benefit group with about 2 years before, he and I built up this business. We've got some very significant clients. There's probably 20 employee benefit plans we're doing, and we're doing some work. So we're getting ready to do the Freeport Copper and Gold plans, and I'm like, perfect. I called the CFO. Her name's Kathleen Quirk. I said, can I send you an invoice for all the plans we're getting ready to do audit? She said, how much money do you need? I said, $50,000. She said, all right, come pick up a check. And it wasn't a gift. It was an advance on fees.
Sure.
But God, did she help us and save us and help me at that point. And I never was so glad to cash a check in my entire life. And so that got us through Katrina. And then we started doing some forensic accounting work for State Farm Insurance. They had all these business interruption losses where people were claiming losses, and they needed somebody to go through those losses and say, did these people actually lose money from Katrina, or were they losing money before and they're just filing claims? So for 2 years, we filed business interruption claims and calculated the loss or profits that people lost and helped the lawyers determine how much they should pay.
Right.
And so then, we grew from there. And so we took probably one of the sourest lemons that we could have possibly had and found a way to make some lemonade, as trite as that sounds. But sometimes from those difficult, gut-wrenching places comes the greatest growth in the world. Yeah. And so we found a way, and we got lucky, and we got some good referrals, and we had some great clients. And only through the grace of God am I here today to talk about it. 2005, we get through it. We move back to New Orleans. My house isn't flooded. Let's say that, at that point, I had a wine collection, a little bit of wine, insurance paid that. They put our slate roof on our house. At that time I was still trying to prove myself. Mm-hmm. So I was collecting white burgundy, and we had bought a house near St. Charles Avenue.
Wow.
Slate roof, and slate roofs aren't inexpensive.
Right.
So we had to do some work. We had to fix the house, and we had to rebuild our business. But what brought us back to New Orleans instead of staying in Baton Rouge was the relationships and our friends. The stuff can be replaced, but our friends that we love, my running group, my clients, my employees, and my friends, it's the relationships that really brought us back. Because a lot of people left, and they had great reasons to leave, and I understand that. But we wanted to be in New Orleans. So
you survived.
We survived, and then
now
grew from there.
Yeah, and so survival went to thriving. And so I was really interested in some of the content that I've seen you put out recently, Eric, your Virtual CFO product. I was wondering if you could tell us about that.
Yeah, we've kind of shifted from a traditional CPA firm to being a virtual CFO firm. In that we're really not those bean counters, but we really want to understand people's businesses. We've closed the fences in, and we're really concentrating on 3 markets: real estate investors, a multi-family and corporate developments, medical doctors who do surgery and entrepreneurial in spirit, and high wealth individuals and families who have, for lack of a better word, a family office, right, closely held group of family companies, and really want someone to help them direct their vision, their finances, their retirement, all those things. And so we want to be that person, and we really found a little niche, and we love it, and we try to help people.
Yeah. Well, it looks like a cool product and a cool service, and when I read about it, it's something that certainly captures my interest.
And I will tell you one other quick thing. After Katrina, there was this great uncertainty in the market about New Orleans. People saying,
right.
You live below sea level, you shouldn't live there. And I'm like, no, we're going back. Right. And so my wife and I bought a building in downtown New Orleans, old fire station, built in 1840, renovated it a little bit, and one of the best investments I've ever made in my entire life.
Wow.
So from those difficult situations, whoever you are, wherever you're at, remember that some of the hardest things that I've ever done have come some of the greatest successes I've ever had.
Now, did you make that your office?
We did, and we rent out part of it to other people. And, New Orleans is thriving. You're in the construction business, the maintenance business. You see what's going on there. And so as a contrarian, I'm thinking, do we get to sell it now? My wife's like, no. Yeah. So I have 2 partners, my wife and God, and I listen to both very closely.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I obviously remember those times. And I remember the senators from Louisiana going to Congress and trying to get an immediate financial package in the, $60 billion. It was a huge number. And I remember, the talk at that time was, look, New Orleans is below sea level. It's not worth saving. There were some conversations like that.
There was a senator, I think, from Iowa who said that.
Yeah.
Made some outlandish, malicious statement about it's not worth saving. Forget it. And
but I tell you, if you look at the rebound of New Orleans, what's happened with the infrastructure improvements, with the levees, with the pumping systems, with the charter schools, as well as some of the commercial developments and just the attraction to a younger age group, and a lot of amazing things going on in New Orleans. I don't think most people could have imagined that they could have rebounded so well. But it sounds like people like yourself were just in love with their home in the city, and that's what it took to fuel that rebound. So,
and we're a city together. A lot of times, as divisive as New Orleans can be, sometimes you go to a Saints game and everybody hugs everybody.
Yeah.
And if Drew Brees gets over this little thumb issue, would not surprise me if the Saints, make it to the Super Bowl this year, the last year of his contract. So, there's a lot that brings us together as brothers and sisters in the city of New Orleans that a lot of people don't get. Right. I don't see that in Atlanta. I'm in Atlanta 12, 15 times a year. I don't see it in Houston, although after, their flood and their hurricane, they came together. But I think the city of New Orleans has a soul. We have a personality, and we're not the neighborhood with a tennis club and a swimming pool in front of 400 houses, and every house is just a different color, and the driveways in the back or the front.
Right.
We got a lot to live for. We have passion, we have life, and we have history, and we have each other.
Well, Eric, you built a thriving business. You strike me as someone who is continuing to change and improve, and I see that as what's kind of been that common thread through your story for when you were trying to improve businesses as a young person, and that they did particularly hire you to do that. But I was curious, in all your years of business, about some of the things that you see young entrepreneurs do and mistakes that they make, and what we might be able to learn from what you've seen there.
Yeah, I've made more than my share of mistakes. I'm wrong every day, at least 50% of the time, probably. But, I would tell you that I've learned that put other people first, put their agenda, what they need first, and that you want to build relationships and not a transactional business.
Right.
So if you're in the jewelry business, it's nice to sell a $5,000 engagement ring, but isn't it great to give somebody what they really need and want, and take the time to understand that? Then maybe you have a client for life. Mm-hmm. You're in the industrial business, and I think you understand how important relationships are. I would say also, don't be in a hurry. Take your time, slow it down. It will come, believe it or not, if you invest and understand and dig deep and try to help people. So, in that same vein, I think go the extra mile. So if you're in the jewelry business and somebody's wife's prong breaks, get it fixed for them. Don't charge them. Get it fixed, then deliver it to their house in a package and tell them, thank you very much for being a client. That's how you end up selling $100,000 worth of jewelry in 10 or 15 years. So you develop relationships that people can trust you with. So seek first to help others. And then one of the things that I've learned is that we all have gifts, and we all have things that we're good at. Stop trying to be good at something that you're really not at.
Right.
Work in your unique ability. Figure that out. If that's a Myers-Briggs, if that's a Colby of how do you process information, or is that an inventory of where your natural gifts are or your desires? And as early as possible, take an aptitude test and figure out where you're naturally really good at. My daughter is a sophomore at a small liberal arts school, and I'm so grateful. We have a great relationship. And she wanted to go to a small liberal arts school. I said, we only have one child, so we said if we couldn't feed them, we weren't going to breed them. So she's going to this great school, Center College in Danville, Kentucky. We're going up this weekend for Parents Weekend, and she's afraid to declare math as a major because she don't want to be known as a math geek. I said, baby, be what you are. You have an aptitude for math and chemistry. That is a gift. Don't be embarrassed socially that you're really good at that.
Right.
And she may end up working at Goldman Sachs. I don't know. I teased her the other day. She made it be in organic chemistry, which is a really tough class. I said, don't worry about it, baby. It's all good. People who make B's in organic usually end up on the back of a garbage truck hollering moan back. And she knew I was kidding. I was trying to make light of the situation that your daddy probably couldn't spell organic chemistry in the 9th grade, and you've really done a great job, and I'm so proud of you.
Yeah.
And so go with your unique ability, go where your gifts are, go where your passion is, and go do something that you enjoy. I didn't enjoy putting little numbers in boxes and making them all add up. That wasn't my gig. Now I got a dozen people working for me who do that, and they don't even do that, okay? But go with something that drives you.
Right. So that's a great bit of advice for our listeners. I want to ask you something a little more specific. What advice would you give a 25-year-old Eric Rigby?
I like to run. You were a runner. You ran cross country, I know, in high school. I've run a couple of half marathons, a marathon or two. I've done a half marathon, Ironman. I would say take care of yourself mentally and physically every day. That you only have one body, only one mind. You need to feed both. And so stay in good mental and physical shape, whatever that is. Eat healthy, exercise, because what drives healthcare costs in the United States is not medicine or prescription drugs. It's our inability to monitor and eat a healthy diet. I was a vegan a couple of years ago. I was 157 pounds 7 years ago. I was running a 7-minute mile at that stage in a half marathon, and I felt better. I was getting up, praying in the morning, meditating, and running, and I'm telling you, that's the way to live. It's the diet that determines mostly. I'm not a doctor. Some people do have a family history of heart disease. But if you read books, there's a book called The China Study, Forks Over Knives by Rip Estlin. It's the diet that is killing America right now. It's the McDonald's and the Coca-Colas and this high-fat diet that is really, if we went to a plant-based diet, we would solve, according to the Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago, about 70% of our healthcare costs.
Yeah.
People taking care of themselves.
Look, let me bring it back a little more personal to you. In hearing your story, when you look at who you are today and the level of success that you have experienced, I just feel like if you knew at 25 what you know today, which is not exactly how I'd phrase the question initially, but I feel that there'd be part of you that's saying, hey, Rigby, everything's going to be fine, or even if you took it back to when, you had your name written on your shoes and different points along your life that maybe made you feel different. But if you look now at the life that you've been able to provide for your daughter, it strikes me as quite a journey. You've covered a lot of ground there, and so can't put words into your mouth, but I wonder what you think about giving yourself that, or maybe you have been doing that all along the way?
I don't know. I think that what I would tell is you need to talk to yourself and know that you will come out the other side.
Right.
I just had a lot of doubts that I was going to come out the other side of the train tracks. You see those tunnels where Bugs Bunny and the coyote, or he's chasing the bunny or whatever through the tunnel, the train tunnel, and I was never sure until 10, 15 years ago that I was coming out the other side. Right. I was afraid that, wow, if I don't get another check, it's all over. And I think that positive self-talk to yourself and saying, I am going to be okay. I am coming through that. And, I remember in college thinking, wow, if I don't get an A or a B on this test, it's all over. No, it's not.
Yeah.
You need to put things in perspective, and you are going to come out the other end. It may be a rough journey. And look, I've been through my share. I've been through plenty of rocky seas. But I think knowing that you're going to come out the other end and talking to yourself through that process, that it is going to be okay. Yeah. It may not be perfect. It may be hard, but you're going to come out the other end. And I would implore people, young entrepreneurs, middle-aged entrepreneurs, others who are struggling a little bit, to give yourself some credit, to be nice to yourself, and talk nice to yourself, and understand that you are going to come out the other end of this, and this is not catastrophic. You're going to make mistakes, and you're going to learn from them.
The other thing I've seen you do over the years is some charitable work, and I was curious what your thoughts are in the relevance of charitable work in your life and the importance of that in your business.
I think that giving back to others is vitally important for a lot of different reasons. When you're young and you're on a tight budget, giving money to wherever it is that you're giving kind of gives you some discipline. Mm-hmm. I think it also gives you a feeling of, I have enough, I can help. And then there's this feeling of when you're helping somebody else, you're really doing good in this world. And so I would encourage people to help. And I don't care if it's the mosque, the synagogue, the Catholic Church, St. Jude's Hospital, which is our family philanthropy, or any other. You're doing a great job with kids who have physical disabilities, providing them exercise equipment via bikes. You're making a difference in the world. And I'm telling you, you improve other people's lives, and that's all great, but you're not doing it for that. You're doing it, ultimately you want to help others, but you get so much more from giving. And the thought that you can make a difference in somebody's life, you can. Each of us can make a difference in other people's lives by simply taking the opportunity every day to do something for somebody that can't repay us.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what life's about.
Yeah.
Now, my mom used to say, I'll say some prayers for you. And I'm like, Mom, this devout Catholic lady, my mom and dad still go to Mass every day during Lent. Wow. And I'm like, God never made a deposit in my bank account. She starts crying. I'm like, God takes care of those who take care of themselves. And she said, that's not in the Bible. I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's not. But we have personal responsibilities. And I think that one of the things that we should try to do, or I should do, and I'm not saying everyone, is to try to help your fellow man.
Yeah. Well, look, you have done that, and I think that's a great place to wrap it up. And Eric, I tell you, we started this podcast earlier this year, and sitting down and talking with people like yourself is a true joy to me. I knew you, right? But I don't know the details of your story. And for you to share that with me and with our audience, I'm grateful for that. And I really think that there's a tremendous value that our listeners can glean from your story. And it's never what you call the hockey stick approach where everything's always on an upward trajectory, right? There's always life gets in the way, and it's not always pretty. But I'm proud of what you've accomplished in your life and the dignified way that you've done it, and how you've helped people along the way. And it sounds like you're just providing a really great service. So, Eric, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and it was my pleasure to be here. And if I can help anybody, I've been there.
How can people find you, Eric, on social media?
At therigbygroup.com, Instagram, Facebook, look me up. And I'll be more than happy to help anybody I can.
Great. Thank you, Eric. And that was Mr. Eric Rigby with Rigby Financial Group. Eric's story is one about survival, perseverance, and always finding a way to take it to the next level. You can see that and hear that in his stories from early childhood, and you can certainly see it in his story about the aftermath of Katrina and how what he did for his business to survive. Eric can be found at therigbygroup.com. You can listen to The Next Entrepreneur on Spotify. You can watch us on our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook. The Next Entrepreneur is produced by Propel Productions. Our producers are Daniel Sagona and Benjamin Connell.